Hello, I'm Rageh Omaar, ITV's International Affairs Analyst, and I'm joined now by Catherine Russell, who is the Executive Director of Unicef. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time. I'll start by saying that you have just come back from a trip to the Sudan and Chad border. Can you tell me a bit about that trip?
Yeah, so it was a trip that was first I went to Burkina Faso and then to Chad, and the idea was to see what the issues are that face the folks who live in the Central Sahel, obviously the children. What I saw was a lot of insecurity, a lot of people, a lot of children displaced, people suffering from the effects of climate change, which, as you can imagine, it's incredibly dry and hot there. So, I saw millions of children or heard about millions of children who are out of school. There are a lot of risks of severe malnutrition, child marriage, all sorts of things that follow from that. So in Chad, I went to Adre, which is right on the border with Sudan, as you suggested, and people come over there every single day across the border from Sudan. They estimate it's about 1,300 people a day who come across, almost all women and children, many of them with absolutely nothing in their hands. They come from places of extreme violence, situations of extreme violence, and seek some refuge in Chad.
And Sudan is one of the largest, I believe, the largest child protection crises in the world, isn't it? And people are coming over, as you say, over the border to seek sanctuary in Chad.
Yeah, Sudan is a terrible disaster for children. Millions and millions. I think it's 17 million out of the 19 million children in the country have been out of school for 2 years. It's the largest child displacement crisis in the world. People are just on the move trying to avoid violence. It's a terrible situation for children. And then, as we're saying, Chad has been a country that has received so many of these refugees. And I have to say, I was struck by how kind and welcoming the people of Chad are. Often there's tension in these situations, and it's not to say there's never tension. I'm sure there is, but for the most part, the communities on the border are very welcoming. They consider these people, somebody mentioned to me that they consider them their brothers and sisters. They take them in, and what teeny bit they have in Chad, which is not much, they're happy to share with the refugees from Sudan. So in some ways, it was such a sad situation, but there were also some bright spots, and that really was one of them for me.
Well, that's good to hear that there are some bright spots in what is a terrible crisis. Can I move to the Middle East and particularly Gaza, which is another issue of crises for children? Can you tell us what UNICEF is doing on the ground in Gaza?
Yeah, Gaza, it's interesting. I feel like I've said so many things trying to describe the situation in Gaza. I'm almost running out of words to describe how terrible it is. It is, for children, just an absolute hellscape. I know your viewers, I'm sure, see this on TV, the sort of desperation of these families. They're just, they have nothing. These children have nothing at this point, no shelter, really diminishing amounts of food, very little water, very little medicine. UNICEF is there. We have always been there trying to be helpful. I actually visited shortly after October 7th and saw for myself what was happening there, and it was just a desperate situation that has gotten only more desperate. And so UNICEF is there trying to provide resources for children who are severely malnourished. We provide something called RUTF, which is a therapeutic feeding for children who are really hungry. We are working on the water problem. We're trying to get medicine in. The whole UN family is there trying to provide a response, but it's an incredibly difficult environment to work in.
Catherine, you say that UNICEF is on the ground. How can you be on the ground? Describe for us what that means.
Yeah, well, it's a constant worry for me, as you can imagine. The way UNICEF works is, in all situations, we have international staff who go in, and we have local staff who are from the communities there who we work with. And so in Gaza, we have international staff who are in there. We have cut back, as has all the UN, a little bit on the international staff because it's just so dangerous. But the UNICEF, the motto at UNICEF is "Stay and Deliver," and these people stay and deliver. They're amazing, and they become very integrated in the communities. They know what the community needs. There's a lot of trust between UNICEF and the communities there. So we do our best. We try to get as much in as we can, but there's not nearly enough going in terms of food, fuel, water, medicine. It's a really desperate situation. And so what it means is, we're there trying to manage, but trying to manage with much less than we need to address the needs of the population.
Well, this issue of aid, whether it's water, food, or fuel going into Gaza, is a hotly contested issue. And Israel has been clear about that, and as have your international sort of donors. So what is the situation in terms of, aid inflows into Gaza?
Yeah. The situation in Gaza is very simply, we are not getting enough aid in. That is the very simple answer. And, it could be a million reasons for that. But at the end of the day, the result of that is that children, those are our concern in particular, are, they're literally on the verge of famine. We have what we talk about as a man-made drought because we can't get water into there. So this is an unacceptable situation. We need to figure out how to get more resources in. And I would say, there was a pause in the fighting now maybe 2 months ago. We were able to get a lot of resources in. And when I say we, I mean the UN family and some other of the national NGOs and international NGOs. We were able to get, there's a lot of discussion about trucks, which gets to be kind of crazy. But, at that point, we were getting maybe 600 trucks in a day, right? So we could get the resources in. What that shows to me is that the international community knows how to get the resources in. We just need the access so that we can do that. And if we don't, the consequences for the children there are just dire. I cannot say that strongly enough. It is a terrible situation for children. We see wars all over the world, wars and conflicts that are all terrible for children. But we have to be able to get in and do the humanitarian work that is necessary to keep children alive and to try to preserve some sort of future for them and ultimately a better future for the countries that are right now in conflict, but hopefully will be out of conflict at some point.
Just to stay on Gaza for one more point, Catherine. I mean, one of the issues that Israel says and international donors is a worry that the aid is not getting through to the people who need it most because Hamas is there on the ground and some people are looting the aid. Is that a concern of yours?
Look, it's a very complicated situation. You can see that, right? I think, and I think this is the view of most humanitarians, is the key to that is to get so much aid in that people aren't fighting over it, right? That there's not a market for it because there's enough for everyone. Right now, what happens is, and it's usually, the World Food Program, they get some trucks in that have food and they, get attacked by whomever. It almost doesn't matter by whom, but they get attacked and the aid gets taken. If you had plenty of aid, which is what happened when we had the ceasefire and were able to get in there easily, then you don't have that, right? Because there's not the motivation because people are not panicked that they're not going to get food because there's enough food coming in. And I think that's really where we need to be. We need, and the resources exist. We all have resources. We have trucks full of stuff we're trying to get in. We just need the access so that we can do that more safely for our people. It's very dangerous for humanitarians, but most importantly for the children who are there who are so desperate.
Last question, Catherine. We live in an age where international aid is under pressure, whether it's from the United States government or the UK government. People are spending more money on defense because we live in a very dangerous world. What does that mean for impacting your work to help children around the world? Because aid budgets are being cut, let's be honest.
Yeah. Look, the challenge is, and I understand this, I understand domestic politics, I grew up in that world, but the challenge is the needs around the world are enormous. And I would say at a minimum, needs are staying the same or growing, right? It's not getting better. And it's the worst possible time to have these cuts. I have to say, I understand the pressures, but it is a tiny bit of money for each country to pitch in to save the lives of children all around the world. And I think if we think about it for a second, all of our countries, the populations in our countries where we have resources, don't want to see children starving to death. They don't, right? They don't want to see children dying of diseases that we can prevent. And I think it will take a little bit of effort on the part of everyone to come together and try to make the world a little bit better place for children who have no responsibility for any of the terrible things that are happening. They have no ability to start wars or stop wars, right? They are just the victims. And that is bad for everyone. It's bad for the children, of course, it's bad for their families, their communities, it's bad for those countries, and ultimately I think it's bad for the world to have populations that are so desperate, so underserved, when it would not take that much on the part of all of us to pitch in and make their lives a little bit better.
Okay, Catherine Russell, Executive Director of UNICEF, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.